All right. Okay, so I have a couple of people joining, but if you're just jumping on and you're not one of the people who actually signed up to be part of this and you don't know who I am, I'm Charlotte and I work at the New Canaan Historical Society in Connecticut, and we have this beautiful evening gown exhibit from our collection this summer, and it's actually coming down at the end of next week. So I did a tour of the evening gown exhibit earlier. I'm just doing one more now so that people can get a sense of what it looks like if they aren't able to visit in person. I did turn the lights off because they do like a weird, I guess TikTok can't keep up with like the frame rate for the video, so they were like flashing, which is weird. So I think it's nicer with the lights off anyway. But yeah, let's get started. So the collection itself at the museum has about 6,000 pieces in it, which is, I think, like second largest in the state. We haven't confirmed that, but we haven't heard of anybody else having more, so that are around the same. For context, some of the other historical societies that I've spoken to only have about 30 pieces, and we have over 6,000. So that's kind of exciting. We decided to do evening gowns this summer because we did wedding dresses last summer, and evening gowns are just much more colorful than the wedding dresses, and they show a lot of the opulence and elegance from the time periods. So we'll start with the oldest dress, and we'll just go chronologically. The bulk of the evening wear in the collection starts around 1860, so we decided to start the exhibit at 1860, and to cap it off, we just did a century, so we went up to 1960. So this is the oldest dress in our exhibit, not the collection, but our exhibit. And this dress is from 1860, and it was worn to President Grant's inaugural ball. And we actually have a picture of the ball here. So this is from the newspaper, and the dress was worn by a relative of somebody who lived in New Canaan and then donated this dress later on. This is the New Canaan Museum and Historical Society. Somebody just asked, and I just work here as clothing historian, so if you view all of my other videos, you can get a sense of what we have in our collection. So yes, this is our 1860 dress. You can see it has very wide skirts, and it actually has a matching cap, which is kind of exciting. So I can get a little bit closer, but the cap has these little glass beads on it, which is kind of cool, and it has matching silk to the dress and matching trim and a pink feather. So that's kind of fun. I like this because it has the tiny little pearls, and it was between this dress and a black and white dress that's a very similar silhouette that was worn to a ball with the Prince of Wales, but we ended up going with this dress because we just did a wedding dress exhibit and we wanted more colorful options to be on display this time. So this is the dress. If I stand here, it looks like she is wearing the hat, so that's kind of cool. Our second dress, if nobody has any questions, is dress. This is from the 1870s. I have never done this before, so I apologize if you are looking at my nose. But this is the 1870s dress that we have, and you can kind of see a very similar silhouette. It's a little bit more collapsed, and there's a little bit more emphasis on the back, but you still get that sort of wide, sweeping skirt. Now, in the 1870s, there was an influx of Japanese art in fashion and Western culture because they reopened trade between the Western countries and Japan. So a lot of people felt really inspired by the Japanese culture and incorporated it into their own everyday lives. So it's truly incredible to me as part of a very, very small historical society in Connecticut that we have a dress that actually exhibits this cultural shift. So this is the 1870s dress that we have, and you can see up close all of the Japanese-inspired vintage embroidery, which is beautiful. Now, I did do a little bit of research onto whether it is actually Japanese or Chinese, because you can't really tell by looking at the motifs, and based off of context clues and historical research, we have to assume it's Japanese because of what was going on, but there is a lot of crossover culturally and historically between Japan and China because of their proximity, so it's possible that they borrowed elements from China as well. However, there is a huge movement during this period of Japanese-inspired art, and therefore we believe it is Japanese. So that's kind of a little bit of historic context. To prevent people from stepping on the train, somebody asked, I think they were just aware of the trains because it was very common for dresses to have them, so I'm sure they were just keeping an eye out for it. And the material is, I believe, silk. I'm not a textile expert, but we did have somebody come in and look at all of the dresses in the exhibit to talk about what the fibers are, and a lot of them, especially the fancier ones from sort of the earlier periods, are silk, because that was a pretty high-end material. Moving on to our 1880s dresses, these are some of my favorite in the collection. We'll start off with this one right here. You can see that the skirt is kind of similar to this one. You know, you've got the sweeping taffeta, but you get no train on this one, and you get more of that shelfy bustle on the back rather than sort of like that sweeping cone shape. So the skirts have collapsed at this point, and you get more of this upright, rigid silhouette. This dress is particularly interesting because we believe it's actually missing pieces. So the beadwork you can see stops about here, and I personally think that that's because if you move around, this part of the dress is going to rub off the beads, which would be silly, so they probably thought it was not necessary to bead all the way up. However, why would you leave that exposed? We don't know. So we think that it's missing a sort of draped swag piece. We do have other dresses in the collection that have sort of like a third kind of like Cinderella-y puff that goes on the front. So it's not uncommon that it could have had a third piece. We just don't have it. It wasn't donated with the dress. And then we also think it might have had some sort of passementerie here to cover the laces, because it's uncommon to see the laces exposed at this point as well. So something to think about. Sometimes the dresses don't have pieces with them because they just aren't donated that way. I'm going to try and keep up with the comments this time, because last time I left them to the end and I feel like people weren't able to stay. So if there are photos of the dresses online, they're on the museum's website. Not all of them are up there because it is labor intensive to put them up, but we do try and keep track of a lot of the dresses that go into our newsletter and database on our website. We do have our wedding dress exhibit from last year up virtually as a virtual exhibit, and we are going to be hopefully doing the same thing for this one. So you'll see all of these dresses online at some point. It's a work in progress, and there's not many people here, so it takes a hot second. So this is our second dress, and this is probably one of the most important dresses in the collection. If anybody knows anything about House of Worth, this is a super, I cannot stress how famous this designer is, especially for the fashion world and the 19th century. So Charles Worth was a very famous designer in the mid-1800s. He shot to prominence after he made the wedding trousseau for the Empress of France, and everybody loved her dresses and they all wanted their own, so they went to Charles Worth. Now, Charles Worth is considered the founder of couture, of haute couture. So he created basically the first couture house in Paris, and the super interesting thing about this dress is that when we were going through our database and trying to figure out what dresses to put in our exhibit, we came across a dress in our records that said green dress, bad condition, deaccession, question mark, like horrible condition. And we, of course, have to go through every single box to really see what they're talking about. And so we had to go through and open this box, and we were shook, you guys. Not only is this dress in perfect, almost perfect condition for its age, but it had a Worth label in it, which is crazy. So another fun fact about Charles Worth is that he was actually one of the first people to put his label inside dresses so that you would know that they were Charles Worth. So this dress is chock full of Worth House of Worth labels, which is crazy. And it's in amazing, amazing condition. Now, the dress does come with 2 bodices. So the one that you see here is one of them, and then we didn't include the other one in the show, but I'm trying to like hold my phone super far away. You can see that the dress also comes with a second bodice. It's a little bit sexier. It's got a little bit of a pointier V on the front, and it's got a little bit of a wider neckline and shorter sleeves. So she would have worn that with like long gloves to preserve her modesty, but it's also really cool. So 2 bodices for this dress. I'll show you a little bit more of the detail work. It's crazy to me also that our super, super small historical society has not 1, but 2 House of Worth dresses. I don't know where these people in New Canaan were getting them, but we have 2 House of Worth dresses. The other one is not on display right now, but I just posted a video about it. So if you want to see what it looks like, it's not as, it's a little bit funkier than this one, but it's still kind of cool. So this one has all of these beautiful, beautiful sequins. They're all made out of metal. And then on the interior right here, you can't really see, there is lace that it laces up inside. So it's all hidden. And then the train is triple tiered. So you can see 3 bubbles on the back, or 2 bubbles and a small train. And then these ribbons on the side are actually only on one side. So the dress is slightly asymmetrical. I don't know if you can kind of see, there's a ribbon over there and not one on this side. And then I promise I just washed my hands, and I handle these dresses all the time, but I just want to show you guys what it looks like underneath. So the dress is actually in pristine condition for being like, I don't know, almost 150 or so years old. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but the only thing about this dress that is in disrepair is the underside right here, which is shattered. So unfortunately, it just happens to silk after 100 years. Silk was treated with chemicals during a certain point in history to make it heavier because silk was sold by weight, and the chemicals they treated with cause it to shatter after about 100 years. And unfortunately, there is nothing that historians and fashion experts can do to fix it. It just goes. There's no way to stabilize it. It's like glass. So unfortunately, that's what's happening underneath this dress, but the rest of the dress is actually okay, which speaks to the quality and craftsmanship of a Worth dress. I don't think somebody mislabeled the dress in hopes of taking it because it has the Worth label. So, it's not like sewn in. It's sort of like on the body. You would have to see it. Maybe I can take a picture at some point in the future. But they're pretty stuck in there. So it's also pretty obvious sometimes when somebody like sticks something extra in a dress that's not supposed to be there. We come across that sometimes. We can't restore it personally because you can't restore shattered silk as far as I'm aware with my research. But we also don't do conservation and restoration here at our museum. We're a tiny nonprofit historical society. The fact that we have a collection this size is just mind-blowing. And to put it in context, we did get one dress restored. We sent it off not for restoration, conservation. They're 2 different things. And we sent one of our wedding dresses out for conservation work last year. And it took 5 months of $5,000 to stabilize the interior so that you could hang it on a mannequin, and then they just like realigned some buttons and cleaned it a little. It wasn't even a visually a huge shift in the dress. So we were just like mind blown at how expensive it is for some stabilization work. So conservation work is so technical, it's so scientific, and it's so expensive. We don't have the facilities. A dress like this, before I move on, because I will talk about this with other dresses, it's impossible to say how much a dress like this would have cost. They're all like made to order. They're all made to measure for the person. The lady who wore this, her name was Mrs. Morgan. She was the wife of a prominent banker. His name was David Morgan, and they lived in New York City. They moved to Paris for like 3 or 4 years in the 1880s with their family before moving back. So it's my belief that she actually bought this dress at the Worth flagship store in Paris. Now, the dress was not donated with a receipt on how much it was at that period, so we can only do research on what other dresses from Worth might have cost. There are a couple of other dresses in our exhibit that do have price tags or are mentioned in texts that we can compare to. So I will talk about those in a little bit, and some of the prices are shocking. So I would stay tuned. But yeah, super, super interesting. The oldest dress that we have, side note, somebody asked, is I think late 18th century, so 1780-ish. And I also have a video on that too on my page. The oldest dress in our exhibit is this one. It's 1860, but we have much older dresses in our collection. I digress. This is another dress in our exhibit. The last 1880s dress I will show you, it's actually 1890. So cusp 1880, 1890. We're going in chronological order. Some people hate this dress. They come to it and they're like, ew, that is so ugly. I don't mind it. I actually think it looks like a lantern and it glows from within, which is kind of cool. The other thing that I will say about this dress is that it is a very different size from all of the other dresses in our exhibit. So not our collection. We have a wide variety of sizes in our collection, but we wanted to include this dress in our show because a lot of people, especially when they see that dress over there, they assume when they walk in that everybody in history was super, super tiny. And that is not the case. I think that comes about in a couple different ways. Excuse me. And this dress goes to show that people throughout history were all different shapes and sizes, just like they are today. People are people no matter what. People may have been smaller in the past because there was less homogenized milk and pasteurized, whatever, and, different access to different types of food, but they still came in different sizes. Now, why don't you see smaller or larger sizes in museums? That's because of two things: survivor bias and what you can fit on a mannequin. So museums are definitely constricted to what they can put on a mannequin, and sometimes we cannot fit our smallest dresses on these mannequins, and sometimes we can't fit our largest dresses on these mannequins. All of the dresses with cloth fabric are cloth mannequins that we had to purchase specially to be able to build out to fit the dresses, and a lot of the dresses are on hard plastic mannequins, and those are much harder to put on the dresses on because the dresses were made to fit the body of the person wearing the correct shapewear of the period. Somebody just asked if they wore smaller corsets and shoe sizes back then. I believe that they definitely didn't because, again, people are people no matter what time period you are in. And if it's not comfortable, chances are people are not going to wear it. My younger sister hates wearing things that are itchy. She will not put it on her body because she just cannot, sensory. People just won't wear something that they can't breathe in, that they can't walk in. So this dress is significantly larger. It's not huge by today's standards, but it's definitely much larger than some of the other dresses in our show, and we definitely had to build this mannequin out. So we could not put this dress on a mannequin until we were able to get their proportions correct. If you want to see what she looked like, we actually had her dress in our wedding exhibit. It was flat in a box because it was not structurally sound, but it came with a wedding portrait, and we have her image on our website in our virtual exhibit. So I definitely recommend checking that out. I think she had brown hair, but the picture is black and white, so it's kind of just cool to see what she would have looked like if she had worn this dress. You get more of that flowing skirt and the draping bodice. This bodice is kind of cool because it fastens asymmetrically, so you definitely won't be able to tell because it's very intricate how they were able to put these dresses together. A different silhouette. I think it needs a petticoat, but we are working with what we have. It's a very small museum. Moving on to our next dress, this is one of our most most viewed dresses on social media. So we wanted to include these two dresses because they're beautiful, but also some of you might recognize this dress. It's got 3 million views on TikTok, which is crazy. So we wanted to make sure that if people came, if we had foot traffic from online, that they would be able to see something that they recognized, which is super cool. Anyway, the super cool thing about this dress is also that it fastens in the back and it has smocking on the front. So a lot of the other dresses create the silhouette by pinning and tucking and straight seams and whatnot. This one created the silhouette, the desired fashionable silhouette, by smocking everything. So it's all one piece of fabric, panels. You can see a seam right there, but large piece of fabric that is then tucked into submission and fashionable silhouette with some smocking. You can also see with the mirror in the back what the back of the dress looks like, and it's fastened down the center of the back, whereas a lot of the ones before are fastened on the front. So kind of a cool transition. And then it pools on the floor, and it's kind of a ballet pink, which is really pretty. So I really, really love this dress. This is our other dress. So this one was like 1890-ish, 1900. This one is also sort of 1900, 1905. And this one gets more towards the 1910s. So you can see a little bit of a difference between the silhouettes. This one is supposed to be asymmetrical. The museum's name is the New Canaan Museum Historical Society. I post all about it on my own page. Feel free to check it out. Anyway, this dress is supposed to be asymmetrical. People get caught up on the fringe on the bottom because they think, oh, it's missing some. I've not personally found evidence that the fringe fell off on the other side. We would be looking for holes in the fabric or pieces of thread hanging down. I haven't seen that yet. So I think it's supposed to be asymmetrical. You know, it's entirely possible. Asymmetry was a fashionable feature. Not all dresses were perfectly aligned. Now there is a perfectly symmetrical aspect of this dress that I will show you. It's kind of cool. But before I do that, I just wanted to point out the front. You can't really see because the lighting is behind the dress, but this part is a little bit blousier and billowy than the other side, and that is because I do think that it's missing a stitch that came off on this back part here, which would have held the bodice a little bit flatter to the chest. Otherwise, she kind of gapes out in a weird way. But she's beautiful. It's very, very Titanic, obviously. It has these cute little beaded elements on the top, which is kind of fun. So the part that's perfectly symmetrical is on the back. I'm going to try and squeeze by, but I'm going to hold it away from my face for a second. So this part you can see is perfectly aligned down the center of the garment. So whoever made this took painstaking care to attach and align all of the fabric up the back very, very carefully. Now, the interesting thing about this is if you look closely, the back actually has added pieces of velvet to make it very symmetrical and very similar, but that is not an original part of the fabric. So the seamstress clearly wanted to keep that element of symmetry going on the back and added a bunch of fabric that you can kind of tell in some places is now peeling off. So kind of a cool piece of history if you look really close. I'm gonna take a break and double check that nobody has any questions in the comments. We are still talking about corsets. I could go on and on about corsets, so maybe we should do a separate video on that. Anyway, this dress is probably one of my favorite dresses. Again, it's super crazy beautiful. It has a little bit of splitting silk, a lot. It has a lot of splitting silk on it, which is why we couldn't put it on a mannequin. It's not very structurally sound. It is in the back in storage, but it's absolutely beautiful. So we wanted to include it in the show, but we also wanted to include it in the show because it has a really cool backstory. It was worn to a very scandalous event. So I can talk a little bit about the cost of gowns in this section, but basically this girl, her name was Carolyn Lydia Goodridge. wore this pink dress to the Bradley Martin Ball in 1897. I did a video a little while back on the ball and why it was so scandalous, but the Bradley Martin Ball of 1897 was considered a very scandalous event, and it was probably I think it's considered the last ball of the Gilded Age because it happened so late in the century. But basically, this lady right here, and you can see her right here in this crown, that is Cornelia Bradley Martin, and she is the mastermind behind this event. So she decided that she wanted to hold a ball in 1897 that cost $9 million in today's money to put on. So the reason that this is so scandalous is because the country had been going through a recession since the 1870s, and so it was considered economically scandalous and just socially tone deaf to put on an event of this magnitude. She can argue, / she did argue, that the reason for this ball was to kickstart the economy and create jobs for people who wanted or needed the financial support, because arguably charity is a point of pride, and a lot of people would not have felt comfortable accepting free handouts from a very wealthy lady. So she hosted this massive ball in New York City. She sent out invitations super late so that people would not be able to make order their costumes overseas. They would have to get them all locally. So you can see a lot of these people here in their very fancy costumes. Her dress alone cost about $60,000. It was jewel encrusted, and she was supposed to be Mary, Queen of Scots, because the theme of the ball was 16th and 17th century attire, which is why you get a lot of these crazy outfits on these people. These are my extra pictures that I wanted to put up, and I didn't have wall space. But here's Mrs. Cornelia Bradley Martin in her Mary, Queen of Scots attire. So it was considered scandalous because she spent a lavish amount of money. It was held at the old Waldorf Astoria, which you can see here, which is, I believe, now the site of the current Empire State Building. So, that is the premise of the ball. Now, the backlash was so severe, people across the country were talking about this event. Preachers were condemning it in their sermons. I got a lot of this information from an old Kentucky newspaper, so it was clearly a nationwide splash. And the government decided to tax the family after this lavish event. So combined with all of the public backlash and the government's threat to tax the family, they actually fled to England and Scotland. Now, I should also mention that it was considered scandalous not only because it cost a lot of money, but Mrs. Cornelia Bradley Martin was feeding information to the press leading up to the event to make herself look better. So a lot of people had a lot of issue with the fact that she was saying that it was for charity and for a good cause, but she was actually using it to bolster her own social image. So take that as you will, and you are more than welcome to do research on the event yourself. But yeah, a lot of people had a lot of issues with this super seemingly tone-deaf, lavish event. This dress is slightly 16th, 17th century. I think it's a little bit of a soft costume because in the 1890s, you also did have very large puffed sleeves and large sweeping skirts. But if you also look at like paintings of old Dutch masters and women in these fancy dresses in the 16th and 17th century, you do see a lot of blue dresses with puffed sleeves. So I think it's kind of historic, but it is a beautiful ball gown, so she clearly had a great time. And I was able to find her name in the attendance list in a newspaper, so that is an extra bit of gold that I was able to dig up in order to confirm whether she was at the event or not. So kind of cool. This is our next piece, and this is a 1914 coat. So you get a little bit, we wanted to include something that is not just a dress. We have lots of evening wear, not just evening gowns. So this is an overcoat from the 1914-ish era. So you're getting a little bit more into that sort of flowy Art Nouveau vibe. It's absolutely encrusted with sequins and beads, so it looks stunning in the light. Obviously, I had to turn the lights off because they were flashing weirdly in the video. But this is really, really cool garment, and you can also see it's tucked up a little bit there, and it has a beautiful pink lining inside. So really, really pretty piece. And also this beautiful flower on the back. Kind of cool. A lot of people ask what the outfit is made out of. I believe that it's actually made out of metal and glass. And the only reason I say I believe is because I have to use context clues. The only way you're going to find out exactly what it's made out of is you're going to pull off a piece of the sequins and hold a lighter to it, and you are not going to find me pulling pieces off of the clothing in this collection and holding lighters to it. That is just a faux pas. So in this era, a lot of pieces of sequins were made out of metal. Leading up to this era, sequins have been around for thousands of years, and there was a huge rise in popularity of sequins in the 20s, especially when they uncovered a lot of sequins in Egyptian tombs around this period. So it's funny that you say it must have taken forever to make, because I actually potentially have a collaboration coming up with somebody that might be able to show us how something like this would have been made. So that is going to be super cool, so stay tuned. A lot of the beads were made out of glass, and then a little bit later after this, you get sequins being made out of gelatin, which is not a good thing because it melts very easily under sort of warm-ish conditions. So if you put your hand on it, you're dancing around and your partner touches it, it's going to get wonky. And then acetate doesn't come around until I think like the 40s or 50s, and that's like the precursor to modern plastic sequins. I think it then gets covered in lots of chemicals, and it doesn't come around until like the mid 20th century. So this is most likely metal and glass. Fun fact. Moving on to our 20s section, I have a really pretty metal mesh bag. There were a lot of metal mesh purses in this period. This one is pretty small, hand for scale. So I think she probably only wore lipstick or a handkerchief inside of it. But the interesting thing about this one is that we have many of these in our collection, but this one actually has a manufacturer coming with it. So this one was made by a Turkish immigrant named Sahatil Mendalian, and he actually patented a way to make the chain mesh that you see the bag made out of, and his company also patented the way that you bind the color to the metal, and he used a lot of inspiration from his own culture to create the beautiful designs on the purse, which I think is really cool. So that one was made by a Turkish immigrant in our collection. And then this is a flapper headband that we have in our collection. So can you still get metal and glass sequins? Yeah, definitely. I think I don't know where you purchase it, but you can definitely still get glass beads and metal sequins. It's just really heavy. That one feels to it. Anyway, 1920s headband. So we have one, which is kind of cool, and we wanted to include a picture from a 1920s movie up top to show what it would have looked like to go to the movie, see somebody wearing a headband, and be inspired to purchase your own. I don't remember what movie that is, so don't ask me. I have to go look it back up. So yeah, that is our flapper headband. It's got sequins all the way around the back and a cute little rose on the front, and then more sequins. So lots of rhinestones, very pretty. This is our 1920s gown. So we actually have quite a few 1920s dresses in our collection. And it was really, really tricky to photograph them because they were not thinking of the longevity of 1920s dresses when they were making them. And so a lot of these dresses are made with beautiful fine chiffon and net, and then encrusted in beads, which make them so heavy, and there is no structural integrity in any of the shoulders. So we were able to photograph them very quickly on mannequins to get that one really good shot that will keep forever, so that we know what it looks like in 3D, and we'll probably never put it on a mannequin ever again, which is so sad. So we originally thought we weren't going to put it in the show, but we decided that we were able to come up with this glass box sort of idea. So we came up with a way to display it flat without making it look boring. It was my idea to put it on that plastic form, and I think it looks amazing. It kind of brings it to life a little bit. But there you have it. So this dress is actually super, super interesting because fringe is, there's like no good way to stand because the light is coming in right now. Fringe is actually a 1960s idea of what a flapper dress would look like. A lot of flapper dresses didn't actually have fringe on them, and they were just very heavily beaded, and they used a lot of lace and lace beadwork and whatnot, and like floral pieces for decoration. Fringe like this is very time consuming. You have to make it by hand, and then you have to attach it, so it's very labor intensive and time consuming to make. So it was really only reserved for, I think, professional dancers because of the way it looks when you dance. As far as I know, the girl who wore this, her name was Eunice. As far as I know, she was not a professional dancer, so perhaps she just liked the way it looked. So this dress is unique in that it has both beads and fringe. A lot of our other dresses, which I will try and show you if I can show you the slideshow, don't have fringe, just beads. So this one's kind of cool. This dress would probably have been made with tambour embroidery and machinery. So there's a machine called a Copley or a Copley machine, I believe, where it's like a sewing machine, but it lays down ribbons of sequins like this. And I actually got to try one in Manhattan when I was visiting during the pandemic. There was an exhibit for Broadway. They were trying to raise money for productions while they weren't able to actually play in person during the pandemic. And so they had these machines that you could try out in the basement of this exhibit, which is so cool. And you basically like cranked the crank and made it go, and then you would try and like make a design like these. I think it was so hard. Mad respect to whoever can do that. But basically you can lay a bunch of these sequins out in very quick succession in lines. So I think that's probably what they used for this. So when you think of it being made by hand, it's not as like individual as you would think. So kind of a cool fun fact for the 20s dress. This is a 1930s dress that we have in our collection, and it's classically 1930s. It's made out of blue silk, and it is cut on the bias. So bias cut dresses were made, they were brought into popularity in the 1930s. If you don't know what bias is, hold on, I need my hands to explain this. A bias cut is when the dress is woven or the fabric is woven like this, and then you turn it sideways and the sort of weave is stretched because it's on a diagonal, so you turn it 45 degrees. And what happens when you do that is it creates this very figure-hugging effect with the fabric. So you see here, this is Jean Harlow. She's a 1930s movie star. She's very famous for her figure-hugging, slinky, bias-cut dresses in the 30s. And this is her wearing one of them that's very similar to ours. So I don't think you can see because it's very fine, but the grain of the dress is actually going this way. The problem with that is when you turn something on the bias, the fabric no longer has a straight across hem because the point is hanging down. So you either have to chop it off or, have like a handkerchief hem, which is all the points hanging down, or you have to add fabric on the side, which is where you get all these wonky seams to create that sort of flat hem that you see on a dress like this. The problem with a bias cut fabric or a fabric that's on the bias is that it's so difficult to match up the two biases. So the issue that most people have when working with this type of thing is that when you create a seam, it puckers so easily. Now, the fact that this minimal to no puckering means that it was very, very well made, but it kind of gives you sort of that same idea of what it would look like for puckering, or kind of what I'm explaining. The 30s also had a lot of plunging backs and deep V's, so they were a little bit sexier in this period than the sort of boxy silhouette of the 20s, which is kind of cool. So yeah, this is a beautiful classic example of a 1930s dress. This is another example of a 1930s dress. The gold underneath is bias cut, but it has the gold netting on the top, and you can see it's a little bit more I feel like it's kind of going more towards the 40s when you have that sort of new look, sort of fit and flare, than the slinky dresses of the 30s. Two very different dresses from the 30s in different styles. These are two children's outfits that we have. This one is 1920s, and this one, the date is unknown, but Little Lord Fauntleroy suits were popular in the 1880s and 90s up until World War I. So we can assume that it's sort of turn of the century as well. They're both made out of velvet. We wanted to appeal to a younger audience if they came in too, because you can see how the clothing is, so they're very cute. The dress is purple. Buttons on this one are metal and wood, which are really pretty. And the buttons on this one are reproduction because people ask all the time. They just were added on later. These, and I'm sorry if somebody said buffering. The service up here is so bad, so bear with me, please. This is our collection. Is that better? So Fortuny is based out of Venice, and the beads on the dress are all Venetian glass, based on the fact that his location is in Venice. Gosh, guys, I'm really sorry it's buffering. I don't know what to do about that. I turned my Wi-Fi off, so it's not searching for a signal. But these are the Fortuny dresses. We have two white ones, but we didn't include the second white one because it has sleeves and it looked kind of weird on a mannequin without arms. So we just have one white one. The blue and the red were donated together, and the two white ones were donated together, which is fascinating to me because the fact that we have four and they were donated separately is just insane. So yeah, these are Fortuny dresses. They were worn in the 1930s, and they probably would have been considered a little bit scandalous because they leave absolutely nothing to the imagination when they're on. They're very figure-fitting. So they probably would have been worn more as like evening entertaining in your home. These dresses are also very famous because of their micro pleats. So you can see here that they're very finely pleated, and the House of Fortuny still exists today, and they do not disclose the method in which it takes to make the pleats. So historians and fashion experts can only guess that they're made of by pleating and rolling the fabric between hot rollers, but again, has never been confirmed by Fortuny. Apparently, somebody was in here yesterday taking a tour, and they said that you used to be able to tour the facilities, and now you cannot tour the workshops. You can only go to the showroom in Venice, which is so crazy. The way that you store them is that you actually twist them up instead of folding them so that you don't create a crease, and then you coil them up, and usually people store them in like a hat box. But these ones are, they were stored flat, which is wild to me. When I opened them up, I was like shocked. So obviously they're going to be stored properly from now on. Because if you have a crease in them and they get unpleated, you have to send it back to Fortuny, and I don't think that we have the budget to get these repleated. So basically, we have Fortuny pleated gowns, which is crazy. If you want to see this red dress, which is one piece, a lot of people think it's a top and a skirt. It's actually just one piece. I wish that the colors were better in here because the light is coming through behind, but they're absolutely beautiful colors. Lady Mary actually wears a replica of this red dress in the later seasons of Downton Abbey. So if you want to see it on a person, I recommend checking that out. But yeah, these dresses are beautiful, and they actually retail. You can buy, we have a coat in our collection as well, which I'll show you on the slideshow. You can buy the coats, or you can at least see the coats and scarves on the Fortuny website, but you can't see dresses. If you want to buy a dress, you have to actually go to their showroom in Venice, which is crazy to me. You can buy these secondhand. I think they're like thousands and thousands of dollars online. So we have Fortuny and we have House of Worth, which is crazy. We are a small historical society, and we have such cool pieces. Let's move on to our 1950s dresses. We don't have 40s dresses because we have a couple in our collection, but they're not as exciting, and they probably weren't wearing that many fancy dresses in the 40s because of World War II. So we're skipping the 40s and we're going to the 50s. This dress is a Seal Chapman dress. So she was a designer in the mid 20th century. And she designed for people like Liz Taylor and Aretha Franklin and Marilyn Monroe. This dress was actually a super, super last minute addition to the collection. It was donated 2 weeks before the show opened, and it was just so stunning that we decided to put it in the exhibit. So it was very last minute. This piece on the top is one piece. A lot of people have a question about that. And the purple on the front is achieved by the sort of like bright purple taffeta, and then it's got like a blue net over top, which creates that effect. We don't have petticoats for the 50s dresses, so in order to achieve the fluffy silhouette, we actually put a slip-on underneath, and then we pinned archival tissue to the slip to create sort of that puffy effect. So that's kind of our little trade secret. That's how we achieved that look on a budget. And this is our other 1950s dress, which is obviously very similar in color, so they complement each other very well. This dress was bought in a shop called Susie Perrette. She was a store / designer maybe, that was based out of Stamford, Connecticut, which is super close to us. And her shop was aimed at creating affordable clothing, evening gowns for women. What that means is we actually found an ad for the shop in the local newspaper, so we printed it out. This dress is about $22 back then, which is about $200-ish today. So much more affordable than a Gatsby dress. I totally forgot to mention, but somebody pointed out that in The Great Gatsby, Daisy purchases a dress and is talking to her friend Jordan about it, and that's a beautiful flapper 1920s dress, and obviously they were like millionaires in that book. But the dress that she buys, F. Scott Fitzgerald names like $200 in 20s money, which today would be like $4,000, which is mind-blowing. So $4,000 for a flapper dress versus $200 for this type of dress. So somebody else said that they have a Susie Perrette dress, which is super fun. So yeah, that's what this dress is. And also the picture in the advertisement was super, super similar to this one. So we wanted to include it as well because it kind of looks like the dress is being advertised in the newspaper. Moving on to our 1960s dresses, I will side note say that the tuxedo is not a 60s tuxedo. It's from the 20s, but we didn't have space in our exhibit for it in the 20s section, so we put it over here. But it does go to show you that the tuxedo is a pretty timeless creation. It very much complements the 60s dresses as well. So this dress is a very classic 1960s silhouette. It's very Jackie O. A lot of 60s styles had matching coats, and we actually have a Balenciaga in our collection as well that has a matching coat too from the 60s, so you can tell it was a trend. This dress is a Princess Galitzine label dress. She did a collection with Lord and Taylor in the 60s. Princess Galitzine was a Russian refugee in the 1918 revolution. She was a small child. Her family fled to Italy, where she grew up, and she is credited with, where she became a fashion designer, and she's credited with the creation of palazzo pants, if anybody's ever heard of palazzo pants. And then she went on to do a line with Lord and Taylor, which is what you see here. So that's what the interior label on this dress says. This dress is another 60s dress that we have in our exhibit, but it is a little bit more of that traditional silhouette. So this one is very much that sort of like swing, short, fancy dress, cocktail dress, and this one is more of a traditional ball gown. It goes to the floor and it has that nipped in waist and floor length skirt. This is our last dress in the exhibit minus the slideshow behind me, and I'll try not to show that because it can be distracting. But basically, this dress is a 1960s dress, but it was actually made, we believe, in 1969. So it was a mother of the bride dress, and we were able to contact the bride or the woman who donated it. And she said that it was the dress that her mother wore to her wedding. So we got super, super lucky. We had no idea that she would actually have a picture of her mom wearing the dress that she was able to send to us. So this is what the mom looked like in the dress. And this is what the dress looks like on display now. So it's kind of cool to be able to see it on the original owner. The the woman got married in 1969. So, 1970. It was March 1970. So we believe that the dress was made and designed in late 1969 and then worn in 1970, because it does fit in with later styles in the 60s as a transitional period to the 1970s. I feel like this one is very I Dream of Jeannie. It gets more into that bohemian style rather than the traditional hourglass figure. This one is a little bit more of that straight up and down with the flowy sleeves. And a little bit of a fun fact, the dress is backless. So mother of the bride was feeling very fancy and she had a little bit of a backless dress, which is kind of cool. So I really like this minty green dress, and I'll show you the picture of the lady. I'm really trying not to get that slideshow in one more time up close. So there's the dress, and here she is wearing the dress, which is super, super cool. So the slideshow. This is the slideshow, and we're starting smack in the middle of the 20s. But basically, the slideshow is to incorporate all of the dresses that we had in the collection. These are nowhere near all of the evening gowns that we have, but these are additional dresses that we wanted to include in our exhibit that were not structurally safe to put on a mannequin, or maybe we already had a dress from the decade that we wanted to put in the show instead, and we already have like 5 1930s dresses, as you can see behind me, so we didn't have any more. We also only have a finite number of mannequins, so these were the additional dresses that we wanted to showcase that couldn't be displayed in person. So I can go through a little bit of the dresses with you. This one is one of my favorites. It's one of the first ones that I actually photographed. And it comes with a picture. So this one was worn to a debut dance. And there she is in the corner. And then there she is actually wearing the dress. It's called our Ginger Rogers dress because it has all of the feathers on it, which is super cool. This is the Fortuny coat that I was talking about. So that's kind of fun. Fortuny's coats all have this very velvety look to them with the cool trim on them. This one is a beautiful 1930s evening gown. It has a net back that kind of looks like a cape, which is really cool. I'm trying to find a sweet spot because the screen is really bright. This is another super heavily beaded 1930s dress, again with that plunging back, and another beautiful bias cut 1930s dress that we have. I'm still waiting on the girl whose grandmother owned this dress to get back to me on some information, which is kind of cool. This is one of the first dresses I photographed for the evening gown exhibit, so I love this one. Also bias cut silk with the beautiful back. This is one of my favorite dresses, but it's so structurally torn up on the inside that we couldn't put it on a mannequin. We were only able to photograph it. It looks like a mermaid. It's absolutely stunning. I would have put this one in over all of the other dresses, but it was not safe to put on a mannequin. Somebody else asked if I ever wanted to try on a dress, and obviously I love historic fashion and I would like to wear all of these dresses, but I don't, and I don't even say that I don't even try them on in secret. People ask me that all the time. One of the conditions or expectations when somebody donates a dress to a museum is that the piece is going to be cared for by the museum for research and display. So the museum is not really the same as like a costume house or a rental place. And it's not safe for the dresses to be tried on by modern day audience because by side note, that's the Balenciaga I was talking about. Because the dresses were made for the original wearer in the shapewear of the time period. So definitely different than what I'm wearing today. And people remember very well the Kim Kardashian scandal with the Marilyn Monroe dress, so I like to point that out as an example on why we don't try the dresses on, because it's just not safe for the dresses. So that is why people who recreate costumes are so special, because they're able to create wearable versions of all of these dresses for us to try on. But we don't try on the dresses here, we just use them for display purposes and research, which is kind of cool. That's not to say that you can't wear historical clothing. There are pieces out there that museums don't want. They might be too old, or they might already have a copy of it. So if you buy it at like a thrift store and you just have it in your own personal collection, or it was handed down by family members, then you're welcome to do with it what you want. You can try it on, you can cut it up, you can sew and add on or take away pieces. So it just depends on where the garment is and what you're using it for and where it's from. So yeah, that's the end of the slideshow, but it does loop around, and I think that some of the older dresses are really cool, so I'm gonna keep showing you them. And then also we have a little bit of a video out front that's kind of cool to look at, with movie clips of people wearing dresses. So I can keep talking about this forever, but we looped back around to the beginning of the slideshow. So this is our 1870s dress that we wanted to include. I just posted a video about this cape on my TikTok, so I recommend checking it out. It's really pretty. It's from the 1890s TikTok, so I recommend checking it out. It's really pretty. It's from the 1890s, so we're moving up chronologically. This one is really amazing. It's super finely detailed. This is also another 1910s dress that is super, super heavily beaded. It looks straight off the Titanic. And yeah, it was so heavy it would not be good on a mannequin for 6 months. This is another 1910s, kind of in the 1920s vibe. It's like got that little handkerchief hem. It's shorter. This one looks like it's out of the 60s. It confuses me because the material is super, super old. You can tell it's not like 60s, you can tell it's 20s, but it just looks so modern. Like somebody would wear that to a homecoming dance in 2012. This is a beautiful cape in the 1920s. So you see beautiful Art Deco elements on the beadwork. This is one of my favorite 1920s dresses. It doesn't come with a slip, so it's very sheer. We added one for the photo, but it looks like a snowflake. It's beautiful. That was one of the ones I wanted to put in the show, but we picked the gold one instead. This is another really beautifully beaded 1920s dress. It'll come up a little bit closer in the next slide. So you can see a lot of the beadwork here. There's a super heavy belt decal thing, which does not help the shoulder strength on this dress. And then also a beautifully beaded iridescent gown. And we were able to contact the granddaughter, and she gave us the picture of her grandmother. So that's the lady who wore the dress. This is a good example of an alternative to a fancy dress. If you didn't want a beaded dress, there was lots of lace and these little bow things. I tried to steam the bow and it didn't really work that well. So it is what it is. At least we can tell what the dress looked like, even if it's not perfect. This one didn't come with a black slip underneath, so we added it, but it's just a sheer net that would have been worn over a black dress. And then this is a beautiful 1930s velvet. So we're back to where we started if you've been watching this whole thing, kind of in the middle of the slideshow. But yeah, these are all the dresses. That fur thing, as you can see, the feather thing, as you can see, is detachable. So I will actually swing over to the fans before we wrap up. We have a wall of fans, which looks so good in the light, but I can't turn it on because it flashes weirdly. But these are our colorful fans. We have lots of fans in the back, and it was so hard to pick which ones we wanted to include for the show. But these are the ones we settled on, so I can kind of go over them a little bit. This one is like a light pink. I'm so short, guys. I'm sorry. This one is a light pink feathery one that we have. And then this one is a beautiful maroon fan with gorgeous detail work on it. We have this as a picture on all of our promotional stuff, which is kind of cool. This is a nice peacock fan. It's huge. Hand for scale. It's massive. I'm not even doing it justice. So the colors on that one are super, super nice. This one is a beautiful peacock fan. Not peacock, ostrich. Gosh, I don't even know my birds. So this one's an ostrich fan, and it also has beautiful detail work. This one, this fan right here, was actually owned by the mother of a famous landscape architect designer in New Canaan. The mother lived in the 1890s, and she was the student of a very famous pianist. So she was a piano player, and she had a very fancy fan. I'm totally blanking on the name of the famous pianist who taught her, but the daughter's name was Frida Stege. So she was a landscape designer, I think, in New Canaan, And my dad actually interned for her in the 80s, which I think is so crazy. So it's a very small world, but this fan is from the 1890s. And then as far as the other ones go, unless they're clearly labeled in the boxes, I have no idea. So it's kind of hard to tell, but some of them you can definitely tell are not 20th century, or if they are, they're like super, super early. So this one, so old, it's cracking, and the paint is definitely, has some like cracks in it because it's painted literally on feathers. They painted these designs on these feathers, and they've got the peacock. So this one's pretty elaborate, but my neck is hurting. Yeah, I don't know exactly when some of these fans are because we didn't include it in the show. We just had like a little sort of general overview on fans. It's kind of tricky when you're making labels if you don't have dates for some of them and you do for others, because it's kind of awkward to not put it on all of them. So we just didn't put it on any of them. We gave like a general fan overview. This one is, I don't know when it's from. Now you've got me talking about dates. But this one has mother of pearl on it, and it's got black lace. So fans are not my area of expertise. If anybody's a fan expert and they want to weigh in on when mother of pearl fans with lace were popular, let me know. This one has birds on it. These are little angry birds. They look so mad. But yeah, they're so funny to me, but we wanted to include the bird fan. It is also massive, like hand for scale. This thing is huge. The biggest one is obviously in the center, and this one is made out of wood. So all of these tiny little circles are made out of like a gilded wood, and then the this like sort of connecting bit I think would be some sort of like tulle or net. Again, like fibers, not my forte. I do a lot of the historic research for like trends and things. I don't have a textile background. But yeah, this one is beautifully gilded, and it's very shiny in the light. It's got like lots of sparkles on it. This one's really pretty blue silk. This one feels a little bit more modern, not necessarily like plastic, like it's still like wood and silk, but it has a little bit of a more modern weighty feel to it. And there's also sort of like a label right here that you can't really see. So that's kind of cool, but I definitely can't read that because it looks like it's in a different language. But yeah, it's the one blue fan that we have on display, so I wanted to include it for color variety. This one's also pretty fancy. It's pretty big as well. These ones are kind of like our biggest ones. And it has shiny silver flowers on it, and it's a brown fan. And it has all this gilded sort of silvery paint on the wooden frame. And then these little fans in the bottom. This one is extremely sparkly when you catch it in the right light. And it has a little cherub painting on it, and it's much smaller. And it has all these leaves and sparkles. I don't remember what the sticks are made out of, but not plastic, because that one's probably like 1890, 1900. Like that one's one of the older ones I know. Somebody just asked if the fans were used as accessories or ornamentation. People actually used these. Like, people were using these as functional items, accessories to fan themselves, but I'm sure there's also, actually, I can't remember. I feel like I read somewhere that the art of like speaking with fans and like having all the hand signals was a myth. So I'm not actually sure, because I feel like a lot of people get behind that theory, and then this other source that I read said that that's like not a thing. So again, like fans, not my forte. If you want to research that, be my guest. But I do know people used these as items to keep cool, and people still use them today. In other countries, I know that, I mean, personally, I don't use them in America, but I feel like other places do. So they're still functional. This one is a beautiful, I think this one has to be later, because she's got like very Art Deco 1920s vibes, and there's another bird, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, this one is much later because she looks 1920s, 1930s-esque, so obviously not going to be made in the 1830s, when that dress would not have existed. And then this one is also super sparkly and very small. So I really like that one. Obviously, I like all of them. And don't ask me to tell you my favorite dress, because I like all of them as well. But yeah, that is the exhibit. So thank you guys so much for staying the whole hour with me. I'm actually going to bring everybody out to watch. It's like a 2-minute video clip. It's got all these movie clips in it. Sound up. Let me know if you can hear that. This is the end, so it's going to loop around. My coworker and I put this together. We're very proud of ourselves. The point is that you can watch the videos and kind of see what the dresses looked like on people. Kind of hard to see because it's a overexposed. So yeah. Oh no. I hope it doesn't do that the whole time, but yeah. This is the video. Let me know if you recognize some of the decades or the movies that are in this, because we pulled from all sorts of different sources. I want to see that show so badly. I never finished. The video compilation, I'm pretty sure somebody just asked if they can see more. Pretty sure I can't actually advertise it because we don't have, the video clips are short enough that I'm not really sure the sort of licensing laws, but I don't think I can like actually advertise it, even though we used it as like educational and we didn't charge anybody. So I'm not sure what the rules are for that, but I'm not actually sure that I'm gonna like post the video clips on my TikTok. It's fun to watch and it was fun for the show, but yeah, I don't think you would catch me posting like a clip of it on like YouTube or whatever. This whole video, by the way, will probably be posted and uploaded to YouTube after the whole hour. That's just like, I post copies of everything on there just for fun. You can't see them. I don't know why it does that. There you go. That's the end. So thank you guys so much for coming to my evening gown live tour. And that's basically the end. So unless anybody has pressing questions, I am just going to log off because it's the end of the day. So thank you so much for joining me on this video. And I'm so glad that it was a big success. I will leave off with, this is the New Canaan Museum and Historical Society in Connecticut, and we are a historical society, a small museum open to the public, but the exhibit is actually coming down next week. So next Thursday is the last day of the evening gown exhibit. So if you have the ability to come see it before then, I highly recommend. I'll be in the office next Wednesday, but the exhibit will be open all of the other days as well. There aren't weekend hours specifically, but if you call and ask, we might be able to accommodate you. It just depends because we're a little short-staffed right now. But yeah, and the only weekend you would be able to see it would be this weekend. So if you have the ability, I would definitely try and call ahead. Yeah, we don't have specific weekend hours right now because we're short-staffed, but it just depends if anybody's in the area. We definitely have weekday hours, 9 to 5. And I'm usually in like 10 to 4. We are in New Canaan, Connecticut, in southern Connecticut. We have a train directly from New York City. And you can get all of this information on my TikTok page as well, because it's my personal page, but I do work with the museum and obviously want people to come visit. So I always start my video off with where the exhibit is and where the museum is. So I highly recommend coming to see it. And if you can't, check out all my videos because there's tons of information on there too. So yeah, the website is nchistory.org. So that also has some information and the wedding dress exhibit from last year virtually. So thank you guys for joining. I am going to sign off because it's the end of the day and I'm going home now. But I appreciate everybody's super thoughtful comments and questions, and I'm super glad everyone joined. So thanks.